Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the IEEE RAS Solidworks series. Today we're going to be working with Module 1.2, which is about sketching and smart dimensioning, or working within a 2D space, like a 2D plane, to create these outlines that we're eventually going to perform 3D operations on. So the first thing we want to go over today is we want to learn a little bit more about the sketch menu, and specifically how it works, right? So a good way to look at this is if you go into the sketch menu from features, you'll normally be in features menu, you'll go to sketch, and you'll find the sketch button right here. It says creates a new sketch or edits an existing sketch. Now if I zoom out a little bit, right, you can see I've hit the sketch button and I have three available planes, the front plane, the right plane, and the top plane. You can kind of see how they're outlined. Maybe a little bit hard to see them, but if I adjust slightly, you'll be able to see them a whole lot better. Right, so I think I'll probably work within the front plane for now, right? And you can select which plane you want to sketch in as you go on and as you design your parts, what thing you think will work best. So I'm going to go ahead and sketch in the front plane right here. There we go. Now that I'm in this plane, right, I've created a sketch. You can see it over here. Normally it'd be labeled sketch 1, but I've just made one sketch already before to show that perspective block view. Right? So we're working on this sketch right now. So if you go over, not to by exit sketch or smart dimension, but to the right, you should see a lot of different things here. Right? You'll see line, circle, spline, ellipse, sketch fillet, polygon, lots of different little tools here. So if I were to just click on line, right, this is one of the very most basic ones, I can select any point, usually a good spot to just do the origin, and I could click once and I could draw a line, right? And now you can see, right, I have this line that I've created. I could draw another line based on the point, and you'll see I just make one continuous line segment. I could do it again, and then eventually I could draw my last line, move the mouse over the last dot, and finish that line, right? So you just create these continuous segments of lines. Now you'll notice, right, if I press Ctrl Z, right now we have three lines that are not closed, right? This does not constitute a full sketch or a closed sketch. This is an open sketch. It really doesn't do us anything. However, if I take that line like I did before, click on one dot, one end of the line, and connect it to another end of the line by clicking again, you'll see we now have a closed sketch. And when you have a closed sketch, this is when you can do things such as extruding this. If you wanted to extrude and extend this sketch in a direction, that's something you can now do, right? And so we'll learn how to use different kinds of lines, ellipses, other shapes, all these different things that'll help us create more detailed sketches. But the line is always your most basic tool. But since we're going to learn a little bit more about different kinds of sketch tools, I'm going to go ahead and just hit Ctrl Z to undo 4 times and get back to our normal process right here. Another thing we have is the circle tool, right? So I click the circle, and I can click. Now there's different options for circles, but I'll just pick the normal circle, right? I can click to define a center point. So I'll do a center point on the origin, and you can see it gives me kind of that radius in millimeters, because that was my previous measurement system. Maybe I want to make it a 2 centimeter radius circle, roughly, right? And I can click. And since it's 4 little curves, or 4 90-degree curves, right, you'll see that this is a full defined circle, and I could extrude this, right? You also have things like splines, right, where if I click it, right, it kind of creates this curve based upon whatever point you have, right? So if you wanted to make these interesting looking oval-like shapes, right, kind of look like an egg, right? Splines are just ways of creating your own curves that are not really exactly super precise, but just something to use in general. And you can also see there's always drop-down menus, so like spline, style spline, equation-driven curve, right? Lots of really unique tools, but all things I'd recommend you try out yourself. I could do a rectangle, right? So I could pick a corner and define a rectangle. And then that'll close up, and since it's gray, it's a complete sketch. Hit Ctrl Z again. I can also show you a tangent arc, right? I can define different kinds of arcs. 3-point arcs, center point arc, right? So if I went ahead and defined this right here, some sort, like, actually let's go with that for now. Let's take the line, just define a line, right? Only one is necessary. You can see a tangent arc, or lots of different things. So I could make a center point arc if I wanted to, where I could define a center point like I have, select another point, and then begin to create this sort of arc, right? So if I wanted to make myself a Pac-Man looking figure, right, I could define my center point, extend to a certain radius that I've already set with a line, and then just begin to kind of wrap it around. And now if we take one line, we can kind of close this figure, just like we've done before, and you'll see it's a complete sketch now. Right, it's grayed out. That means it's complete and you can perform 3D operations on it later. And there's ellipse, there's all sorts of different kinds of polygons that you can define. Right, this one is particularly a hexagon, so if you want to make some sort of nut, you know, you eventually could, right, through this process. And lots of different kinds of sketching tools right here. Right. Now what I want to do is I want to maybe create some sort of shape. Now I'm going to create a triangle of some sort, right? Pretty easy. I just use the line tool here. Now where Solidworks begins to moves from just normal CAD or modeling to actual engineering software is through the little tool called Smart Dimension up at the top here. So if I click Smart Dimension, I can actually begin to define all these different lines and measurements like you're actually drafting, like a professional mechanical engineer would draft things. So I can go ahead and click on a line, for example, and if I click on a line, I'll try to tell what length it is. So I click on the side line, and it is 32.81 millimeters. I want to make that just straight 30 millimeters, and I can say 30 units, since it's my already defined unit for length as millimeters, or I could say 30 inches. And if I did that, right, then it would convert it to, as best as it can, millimeters. But I'll go and stick with, for now, just 30 millimeters, or just 30 units. And now you can see that's really small. So I'll go ahead and Control Z to get back to my normal status here. As you can see, we have our 32.81. I will define that as 30 units, or 30 millimeters. Now, okay, so I have 30 millimeters on one side, and then maybe I could, maybe I want this to be a 30, 60, 90 triangle, right? So just like how I can actually define lengths, right, I could also define angles. So if I pick the Smart Dimension tool, I could click one line, right, and you can see different ways of doing the measurements here. But I could also define between two connected lines an angle. Right, so I think I will go ahead and define this as down here, and I will say this is a 30-degree angle. Right? Cool. So if I wanted this to be a 30, 60, 90 triangle, I can go ahead and make sure this is defined as 90 degrees, but I don't need to since I've already set this up correctly, so I don't need to actually dimension the middle here. Now I have dimension between these two lines, maybe I could dimension between these two lines as well. And you'll see this is already 60 degrees because one angle is 90, one angle is 30, and of course the last angle can only be 90. So actually I really only need to define one angle here, 30 degrees. Right, and then anything else I would do, right, I said dimension driven, I click OK. But overall I've already defined all these angles here, right? And so what you can do is you can use this process to kind of define different things. You could define distances between points. There's all sorts of little things you could do with the Smart Dimension tool. Right, see now I could define the distance between points, not necessarily the length of the line. Right, so as an engineering tool this is very useful to define exactly how big your part is, right? If you're working on trying to make sure a certain like bolt or a certain screw has to fit in with each other, right? You got to make sure these measurements are correct, because everything is abstract in a SolidWorks part until you actually give measurements and define everything. So you can see we have all these different kinds of ways using this Smart Dimension tool, right? And of course, What we can now later on do is, once we've fully defined our part, we can use 3D model operations to more greatly define it or do 3D modeling operations on it. Now, one little unique thing that you can do is you can actually do something called a linear sketch pattern. Now this is a little bit more of an advanced tool, but it's something I really enjoy using. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all these different parts here. Right, so now I still have my sketch, but overall what I just did is I altered some things. So maybe I want to design a puzzle piece. That's what I'm going to do next. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and make a couple of lines here, right? I'm going to make sort of a puzzle piece where what I do is I set it up and I'm going to copy over some different dimensions. So maybe I could draw a line here, and I could take this line, move it over one, right? Or maybe some sort of part that fits in, slots into an X part, right? So now what I have right now is I have these just multiple different lines that I've set up. It's very possible that I want to use something called a linear sketch pattern, right, to create this pattern of lines that you see here over and over again and move it somewhere else. So if I wanted to, right, I could take these parts right here, select them all, and I click linear sketch pattern, right? And as you can see, right, in the side menu and on the screen in the middle, this linear sketch pattern just takes these units or these certain items that you have in a sketch, whether it be lines, points, everything, and it transfers them, slides them over a linear distance, and repeats them. So you can see I have different kinds of things. I have direction 1, which is the X direction, right? That's currently what we see as a normal X direction, and the Y direction is upwards. So if I wanted to create this puzzle piece, maybe I want to make this puzzle piece, now I'm not sure the total distance here, but I'll go around 30 millimeters. That's probably enough to make it look like a puzzle piece. If you were doing a specific engineering item that you wanted to create, you would have to think more descriptively about this, more measurement lengths, how exactly far is it. Usually puzzle pieces are square, so I'd have to create a size that goes from the top to the bottom is the same the other way. But as an example, this will work out fine. So I've got it about 3 centimeters or 30 millimeters in one direction. I've got the pattern. It looks pretty good overall. So as you can see, I have direction in the X direction, a distance, the spacing, so I could create even more versions of this sketch pattern. But since for this application we only need 2. I could also create in the Y direction, right, as you can see, and maybe I need to increase the spacing more a little bit over here, right, but you could also just as easily create this linear sketch pattern in another direction, right? So it's great for creating, like, if you have some sort of part that has like these little connectors or teeth and you want them to connect over a long period of time, right? It's a great way to save time overall, this linear sketch pattern tool. However, I'm going to go ahead and shrink down the amount of instances in the Y direction, and I'm just going to keep this right here. Pretty good. Whenever I'm finished and the pattern is set up how I want, I can click the check mark. Right, so now you can see I have the original pattern on the left and the exact same pattern but just translated over to the right. But as you can also see, this is not a complete sketch yet because it's open and it's not closed to its surroundings. Just like anything else, I can take a line, close it up, right? That's one. Go to the other side, and now I have a fully defined sketch pattern, right? Now this looks like a puzzle piece, and it works really well, right? The same thing can be done in a circular pattern. So for example, if I were to take so just this short little example here, I could create a little triangle, right, which is also part of the sketch pattern, and I could do not just a linear circle sketch pattern, but a circular sketch pattern as well. Now, since our part is very blocked off and at 90-degree angles, this doesn't particularly work. But you can see that if you wanted to make some sort of part where it has different extrusions or different segments in a circle and repeat that pattern around a circle, you could easily use this. And this might be great if you're creating some sort of screw or some sort of other element that you need to repeat in a circle. It's totally up to you how you decide to use this, but it could be very helpful, right? And of course there's different settings like the intervals of x and y, the total amount of degrees this pattern goes around, the number of different spacings, and if I click check or mark, you could see it creates that pattern around a central radius. In this case, it does it around the origin. It's not something we're going to worry about too much, but it is an option there for you, right? So linear and circular sketch patterns can allow you to take one single sketch, one single pattern, and then revolve it or translate it across a certain dimension. And it can be very useful for you to use, right? And just overall, this is just a technique to save time, right? If I wanted to, with these lines that I have here, I never smart dimension them, but if I wanted to, I could easily. Now the thing is that I can, these dots, these little segments of lines, say this whole segment from the top dot, or from the bottom dot line endpoint to the top endpoint, say that was 2 inches. I could cause my whole entire part that I'm doing a linear sketch pattern on, I could translate it up 2 inches. So that way both endpoints end up connecting on the exact same point. Right? So this is a very useful way to create these extending patterns and just save yourself a lot of time if you're creating something that requires a lot of pattern work. Right? But now we've successfully got this sort of segment here, right? It works really well, and then from this point on, I could go ahead and do 3D modeling operations. And that's something we're going to work on in the next module section, which is module 1.3, linear extrusions and linear cuts. So you'll get to see a lot of that in action here in a little bit. So with that, I want to thank y'all for viewing this little SolidWorks series episode, right? We're going to talk about more later on the next episode, and I'll see y'all then.